This will give us a little bit of math background that we should remember or have already known before this lesson, but it's kind of a nice way to sum things up too. Angle pairs are complementary if the sum of their measures is 90 degrees. So we have to remember that two angles that combine to make 90 degrees have a name. They're called complementary. And if they are supplementary, they are supplementary if the sum of their measures is 180. So complementary makes 90, supplementary makes 180. If you have a tendency to have a hard time keeping those words separated, I tend to think of them as in alphabetical order. Complementary is before supplementary, and 90 is smaller than 180. So that's how I match them up. I know that complementary goes with 90 and supplementary with 180 because complementary is first in the alphabet and 90 is smaller. So if that helps you, great. If not, no big deal. And when two lines intersect, 4 angles are formed. And we could draw that if you like to visualize. If 2 lines intersect, it makes 4 angles. We can see that when we draw it, like a plus sign or an intersection. So when 2 lines are intersected by a transversal, okay, so 2 lines are crossed by a transversal, we get 8 angles formed. And that the 2 pairs of vertical angles and the 4 pairs of adjacent angles are formed by the intersection of the 2 lines. Again, very vocabulary rich. Another piece of information that's useful while we're practicing terms for describing all these angle pairs, it's useful to remember that when a transversal intersects parallel lines, all the acute angles are equal in measure, and all the obtuse angles are equal in measure. Now we could deduce this, again, like I said, by the corresponding angles, the supplementary, the complementary. But if we just notice that the sum total of all that means that all the acute are the same and all the obtuse are the same, that really helps. Thus, any acute angle formed with is a supplementary to any obtuse angle formed. So they're all going to match up and they're all going to be equal or supplementary. So let's name the pairs of corresponding angles. That's our first goal, and the answers are right here below, so it's not like it's a deep, dark secret, but I just want you to note this. The corresponding angles are going to be 1:5, right? And then 2 is going to match up with 6. 3 is corresponding to 7, and 4 corresponds to 8. In other words, if you were to basically cut this in half and lay them on top of each other, those would be the ones that were on top of each other. All right? And we're going to name the pairs of alternate interior angles. So we have to remember first to go to the interior. Right away we know that that's inside here, the 4, 3, 5, and 6. And we're looking for alternate. So alternate means they're going to cross the line. So 4 would be alternate to 6, and 3 would be alternate to 5. Okay, and let's make sure that's matching our answers down below. And then on C, we're going to name the pairs of alternate exterior angles. So now these are the ones that are on the outside of the lines, not the interior, but the exterior. So that means that number 1 up here corresponds to number 7, and number 2 corresponds to number 8. They're alternate, I shouldn't say correspond. See, that's a problem with this vocabulary. I've got to be very, very careful. They actually are alternate, not corresponding. Okay? So on C, we named the alternate exterior angles, and D says if the measure of angle 1 is 115, then what is the measure of 5 and 6? Wow. So that's 2 different questions in one. But if number 1 is 115, then we know that number 5 being corresponding is also 115. And we should know that 6 has to make up the difference for the supplement. So it's 115 plus 65 makes 180. That's how we know that 6 is 65. Because it's the supplement to 5, and 5 is 1/15 because it corresponds to 1. So again, very vocabulary rich. All right, we're going to use the diagram that's at the bottom of the page. Now again, this is very hastily drawn and not to scale, but we're going to refer to it to answer the questions. So A says that angle 1 and angle 2 are, and we need to determine, are they complementary, adjacent, supplementary, or vertical, and could they be more than one? Okay, well, we learned that complementary means that they make up a 90-degree angle, and we can see that that's not likely. They are right next to each other, so that would be adjacent. So I would say that we could safely say that these are indeed adjacent angles. And since they're side to side and they make a straight line, although not in my diagram, but if it were a perfect diagram, they would make a straight line. That makes them also supplementary. And when we say vertical angles, we didn't even really talk about that yet, but that vertical would mean up and down, and they are not vertical, they are actually horizontal because they're going along a straight line horizontally. So I would say that the answer A would be that these two are going to be supplementary and adjacent. Now B says that angle 1 and angle 3, so now we have to look at where angle 1 and angle 3 are. Angle 1 is up here, 3 is down here, and now they are no longer on the same line. So they're not going to be supplementary. They actually are going to be adjacent. No, not adjacent. Actually, the only answer that's correct here is that these are vertical angles, because they're not supplementing or complementing. They're not even on the same line, and they're not right next to each other, so they're not adjacent, but they are vertical angles. Okay? They're also across from each other, but they didn't give us that option. So C says, what angle is supplementary to angle number 1? So again, here's angle number 1. And it wants supplementary but not adjacent. So they're eliminating angle number 2 because although it is supplementary, it is also adjacent. So they just want to know which angles are going to complete a 180. Remember, supplementary is 180, but it can't be number 2. So we can eliminate number 2 on the fact that it is adjacent to number 1. And we're looking for ones that are supplementary. So if we also look at number 4, it is also adjacent. So again, does not work. Now 3 and 6 are not adjacent, so now we have to decide if 3 and 6 are supplementary. So let's look. Down here, 3 does not create a straight line, so it is not supplementary. So our only option left now is number 6 down here. And we can see that since number 6 corresponds to number 2, it would be a supplementary to number 1. So that is why number 6 would be the only correct answer there. Our last example has a pair of parallel lines, and it gives us a challenge. It says draw a pair of parallel lines intersected by a transversal, but now the transversal is also special because it makes all right angles. You can see that our transversal in this particular illustration is a straight line, not a angled line like we had in our other diagram. So it asks us some thought questions: which angles are equal in measure and which angles are supplementary. And what we're supposed to notice by this is that we made all right angles. By making them all squared up, it makes everything a right angle. And that just makes it where all the angles are equal, because if they're all right angles, they're all 90-degree angles. So if they're all equal and they all create straight lines, they are also all supplementary. So this is more of just a thought process. They wanted you to see some interesting things. So it's a major lesson on vocabulary and observation. So I hope that that you've gained something from the vocabulary involved here, and from seeing these various diagrams and learning to be like a detective trying to solve a puzzle, and you're very much using your skills of observation.